We have a walk-on under CSE that we'll put in, consent. We have consent, yeah, we can put it in as, I, that'll be 12I. 12I. Okay, so, we have another retirement, Sherry Lutter. I need a motion. And a second?
Second.
Okay, some discussion about our
Our
15-year service. Huh?
Sherry is a reading teacher in my building. She's done a wonderful job, and I really appreciate all she's done.
15 years, very good. So, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, Sherry. Sherry's not here. We are going to have a moment with our retirees.
Yes.
Yes.
In June.
Community chats on the way out.
That, and a very focused time honoring them at a board meeting.
Yeah.
And it's going to be one focusing event that
Yeah.
will do the job.
Yeah. Okay, Kimberly. What are you going to talk about?
Oh, what is it?
So I'm pleased to present to you the proposed budget for 14-15. If you don't mind, I'm going to be seated. I have lots of documents that I'll be referring to in case you have questions. And before I get started, I just want to really thank the collective efforts of everyone, the board, the administrative team, Michael. Hours and hours have gone into this with painstaking decisions. So it wasn't easy to get here, but we did it once again, and I'm really proud of everyone. To begin with, this is just our expenditure budget history. I'll just take a moment for you to look carefully from 2009, 2010 to this evening's proposal at $24.8 million. You can see we started at 23, we dropped to 11, 12 for a couple of years, and we are slowly making that move up again. So for the purposes of the state, they asked that we break down for the public presentation, which most and all of this information will be presented again in May. But for the purposes of the state, we need to break the budget into a three-part budget, and these are the parts that I'll be presenting to you this evening. I won't read them all to you. You can see that the administrative budget is really services for the administration of the school. So when you think of that, the superintendent, myself, the Board of Education. The program component, that is the largest component of this budget, as it should be, and those are all services that enable the district to deliver a sound curriculum. The capital component, when you think of that, think of our debt service, our transportation, all of our O&M, our custodial salaries, benefits, service contracts. Those are the items you'll see in that section. Spending plan by component, you saw this last year, so it's in our budget brochure, and the numbers are incredibly close to what they were last year. You can see the program represents 74.5% of our expenditure budget, as it should. It needs to be the majority of spending to support the district and district initiatives for teaching. I have included line by line for the budget, actually line totals. What I've done is I have drawn your attention to the blue. I'll try better with the lasers tonight. So, all right, Michael, maybe you better do it. There we go. So 13-14 is the current fiscal that we're operating in. All those numbers are in blue if you go from top to bottom. And then the proposal for 14-15 is at the far right, also in blue. So for ease of reading, because there are a whole lot of numbers throughout this presentation, if you compare the 13-14 with the 14-15, you'll see that most of the numbers have remained fairly flat. Most of the increases where they do occur, it is because of contractual obligations, benefits, things of those nature, and I'll try to touch on those as I go through. So I won't necessarily hit on every line when you can see there's really no, they're flat or very insignificant change. Just to point out, Chief School Administrator, that is sometimes confusing because I am showing you the total. That line actually represents the Superintendent Secretary and also the Superintendent. It also includes conference and travel, vacation buyback. There's a jump in that this year. Last year I had scheduled what I thought to be just a number for conference and travel and also for membership dues. And the superintendent's secretary brought to my attention, there's actually a contractual amount that should be in there. So although we didn't spend it, I've gotten those numbers back to where they should be this year. Business administration, that includes myself, it includes the treasurer and the administrative assistant. It also includes, let me check my notes. It also includes state aid planning, Questar, the CDO administration, the CDO payroll, CDO accounts payable, school lunch supervisor, the CDO claims auditor, tax collection. So there are a lot of things encompassed within that overall number. Auditing, you can see, has slightly decreased. As many of you are aware, our population has declined as such that we no longer are required to have an internal audit. That'll save the district about $7,500 a fiscal.
You want to take questions in chunks rather than all at once?
I can do that, or...
Any questions to this point from the board on this, on any of this stuff? Good?
Okay, this next slide, legal, if you notice those numbers, we continue to budget over the actual expense. That's to plan for the unknown or the unanticipated. Our budget is getting so narrow that at this point, we really do have to have additional money in this specific line and we have to plan for those unknowns. In the past, we had additional funds in many lines, so if something came up, we could do a transfer. We're getting skinny enough now that I really have to have the number within the exact line, or we may not be able to pay for those expenditures.
Well, and I mean, so far, the numbers, this is a thing we use as we go, right?
Yes.
And that number, you're getting really good control. I think the administration is getting really good control of that number compared to sort of the kinds of numbers we've had in the not so distant future on my time on the board. We've had that's a pretty big number.
What is our largest legal expense in the past 5 years? How high has it been?
Oh, it got us up to $75,000 as a budget, so it was close to that or more.
No, it was way higher than that.
I recall 89,000.
Yeah, it's significantly above where we are now.
Okay, but 2 years ago, we spent $4,500. Is that what I'm reading, or am I wrong with that?
That is correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
And this year, we spent $27,000 so far?
Yeah, so you can see the unpredictability of that line. And so it's important to carry additional money in that line. Also, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but many of you recall I have what's called appropriated fund balance, and that's what we use each year to lower the levies. And in the past, that was $1.2 million. This year, as you'll see in the next few slides near the end of this presentation, I've reduced that amount to $600,000. So really what that means is that I need to under-expend this budget by $600,000 in order to move that money forward into the next year. If we truly spend it, that's what I refer to when I say that's when we fall off the cliff, because that means any extra money, we're truly dipping into that $600,000. So there are lines that are intentionally overstated. One, to take care of unanticipated expenses, but two, also at year end, if we have additional money, to be able to lower our levy in the future fiscal, or also if we could ever get to a position to reduce our dependency on some of our reserves.
Does that imply that you're taking sort of the worst case scenario for many of these?
Not many, but just some of the more important ones. You know, legal, we just don't know, so it's important to keep that there. Special ed, you'll see is a big number, and I'll point that out to you. Also, in the 13-14 year-to-date expenditure with encumbrances, so what that means is year-to-date was March 31st, 2014. For the most part, in salary lines, we have been able to encumber what we anticipate paying out through June 30th. But there are some lines, for example, substitutes, where we don't know what to anticipate for those lines. We're not able to encumber it. So some lines, truly that represents what we believe we will spend by June 30th. Others are really only through March 31st. So we do have some room to grow in those expenditures in some lines. The personnel line, just to give you some more background on what some of these lines are actually paying for, that's employee benefits at BOCES, Omni, Workman's Comp Administration, fingerprinting. The public information, that's where we pay for consulting services this year, and I've reduced that for next fiscal. We don't anticipate spending as much next year. Central print, those are our printing materials at BOCES. They're not aidable, And I've maintained that number where it's at for next fiscal because we need to make certain that we have funds available to print all the Common Core materials that are needed. Central data processing is really our cooperative bidding from DCMO. We talked about purchasing at the last board meeting, and DCMO manages a lot of that purchasing for us. Special items, this includes the admin services at BOCES. And then finally, for the purposes of the three-part budget with the state, we actually need to break fringe into the three components, the admin, the program, and the capital. In our day-to-day budgeting, I have all the fringe in one category. So I will give you what that total is, but for the admin component, it does represent $246,000 for next fiscal. Fringe being, just for those of you that don't know, health insurance, workman's comp, flexible spending, dental, ERS, TRS, encompasses quite a bit.
Kimberly, on the printing in that, I know we've always gone through BOCES and it's pretty traditional to do that, but if we're not getting any aid on that, have we given any thought to putting that out to bid?
We have outsourced at times when BOCES hasn't been able to meet our printing needs quite a bit more costly.
Okay.
So even though we don't get aid on it, BOCES by far gives us the best price.
Yeah.
In fact, that's come up numerous times,
Yeah.
which even predates me, the business officials, to say, can we get out of this printing services at BOCES, and it never works. It never comes to fruition, it's always less expensive.
And so the problem with the BOCES printing is what, their capacity is limited?
This year, I think there are a lot of printing demands that came in at the beginning of the school year with the Common Core, and it was a ridiculous time schedule. They were just way behind, not enough staff, and it really delayed the paperwork for Sarah.
So they don't have, I don't understand, they encourage people to use the services, and then when people do, the people who use the services suffer from the lack of capacity that the BOCES people implement.
I don't think
Did this
they-
happen with payroll? It's happening with printing?
I don't think
we
they
see a pattern of
anticipated.
behavior? I like Jeff, but maybe he's got a big task
Well,
there.
I know that they're going to a second shift next year for printing services, so that would be a response.
So that's good. I mean, that's what we gotta see. If they wanna share, we wanna share services, well, we ought to be able to at least do as good as halfway we did here.
And I don't think they anticipated the needs on the part of the districts to the Common Core. I really don't. Do you, Sarah?
No, they struggled in the summer, right at the beginning for like the first month, but they have been fantastic.
They're great now.
Are they?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
They
So
have
for
been
instance,
fantastic.
we received them the CD for the scoring materials, it's a quick turnaround. I sent it to Kimberly sent it in, and I said we needed it for scoring on the 21st, and it was available like 2 days later, and Michael brought it back. So they're very responsive at this point.
Okay, so that's good news.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that. Maybe they've gone to those two shifts.
I don't believe so, but I think they're coming out this summer when the vinyl printing gets going.
And so no one thinks it's crazy that we spend all this money on iPads and we're printing paper for...
Cross my mind. I don't think there's a way around that.
Might just be a rhetorical question.
The iPad was mostly used at the high school where they don't.
We don't have the Common Core, that's good.
Not
No,
not as many modules.
We're using the math modules, but we're not printing everything, and we're moving towards printing much less of it, so. But they're talking about mostly is printing for the K-8.
Which is appropriate.
Until we get something in their hand electronically?
There will always be the need for our elementary students to be paper pencil, at least some.
Okay, so moving along, you'll see throughout the budget, earlier on I had identified that we had a gap of almost 800,000. We made reductions just over 400,000. And so I really was challenged with going through every single line. Ever since I have been here, many of the salary lines were previously built, and I would always go in and make the reductions based on what was recommended by the team and what was adopted by the board. However, they had never been built from the ground up. So this year I started to take on that process with the help of a couple of other people in the district office. And so you'll see some lines, and I'll try to point them out, guidance being one of them. That changed from 13-14 to 14-15, even though it includes the TPA salary increase, it's a reduction because it really represents each individual employee within that line at this point. So those lines are very, very tight now. The next line that I would bring your attention to is the social work services. I had spoken previously that in a perfect world, even though some of these positions are grant funded, that I would like to get some of those grant funded positions back into the expenditure budget, just to prepare for that day when we do lose the grant, that we can still hold on to that position without a struggle. I wasn't able to do that this year, so I just wanted to identify that it's still very much grant funded. And the third one, the director of instruction, that includes clerical support, which will be supported by a federal grant in 14-15, so you'll see a reduction there as well. Curriculum development, we had tried this a couple of years ago, however our timing was just slightly off. This supports our summer curriculum development with teachers, and this year we were able to work with FARA and the TTA, and we did move our contractual obligation of $16,000 to BOCES. So you'll see that now in the in-service training, that line gains $16,000, and the beauty of that is we'll pick up just over $11,000 in aid. My hope is that in the end we can reinvest some of that aid back into that curriculum development line for future professional development. Supervision of regular school, again, those salary lines now represent the actual expenditure. In-service training, as I just said, picked up $16,000 for curriculum, the summer curriculum, and in addition to that, we have more and more individuals taking advantage of the graduate reimbursement, and so I needed to increase that line by an additional $17,000. Teaching regular school, the significant change in that line, that's where the majority of our reductions took place for support staff and our teachers, so you'll see that salary line drop significantly. Programs for students with disabilities, as we just said a moment ago, that line is only decreased by $61,000. However, if you look to the far left at our 12-13 expense, it was $2.4 million. I have 2.6 budgeted for 14-15. As you know, depending on the needs of a student, if they come in and the needs of their disability, if we send a student to BOCES, it could be quite costly, so we really can't budget that line very close. In the end, should we not spend that all, it does go to fund balance, or it can be added to put money back into the reserves or reduce our dependency on the reserve. But again, we have to plan for the unknown. It's pretty common in most districts to see that line inflated.
Kimberly, did I understand you to say the in-service training amount includes the contractual obligation we have for reimbursement of college?
That's correct. Occupational education, this covers our CTE students and also one teacher here at the district. I factored a 2% increase for the occupational ed program and also the contractual obligation for our TTA. Teaching special schools is just summer school BOCES. School library, again, has been decreased because it is now based on the actual instructional salaries for the employees that we have in those positions. And computer-assisted instruction represents our IT department, TeachScape, hardware, software, copier leases, bandwidth. This is a very, very large budget, but it continues to support the direction that the district has chosen to go in. Our IT services have changed. We have incredible vision. However, we're finding with all the devices and needs within the district that we need more hands-on support with that. So there is additional money in there for that. We've also identified a future need for increased bandwidth. So there are monies available for that as well for next fiscal.
Increased bandwidth, which would be the technology aspect. Is there a possibility we could wait on that and see if there's going to be government funding by the $2 billion referendum? As I mentioned, that should that pass, our school would be in line for $1.1 or $1.2 million.
Well, the beauty is we have monies available within that line. We have not created the funds at this point. So they're within that BOCES line, but they are not yet spent.
So if that does pass
Yes.
in November, does that mean that we're not obligated to spend the money from this?
Correct. Correct. Good question.
So you think that's going to happen? I think they're just talking.
No, I'm certain.
They're going to put the bond out.
They're going to
They're going to let us vote on it.
They are, that's right. We got that money at the state level now, 2 billion passed
No,
out?
no, they-
Borrow it.
They're gonna borrow it.
They're gonna let us vote on taxing ourselves.
Yeah, nice.
They're gonna let us choose to do that. That's how it works. And they'll save money.
But the consensus is that politically that would pass.
Yes.
Okay, this next slide covers district transportation, more specifically fuel. We've had a significant increase. I factored in about 99,000 additional monies within the propane fuel line. Mike Babcock had shared recently with me that propane has jumped from $1.70 to over $3 per gallon, and that fluctuation we continue to see. So this is a line where we have to plan for the worst. Hopefully it'll come in less.
Are we still getting a reimbursement from the federal government? I think it was 30 or 40 cents a gallon.
We are.
As far as I know, yes. It's voted on annually by the federal government. Basically, what we're enjoying now are the same increases that you see in residential propane throughout the winter. We are seeing some leveling off. The other thing that we've noticed, our past purchase of propane buses, they have a new engine. They have the V10 instead of the V8. The mileage is not what the V8s were. We're at about 3.5 miles per gallon to 4 miles per gallon compared to 5.5 for a diesel. So we're kind of working through that process right now. We just have the first 2 of those. Those are the 2 we just bought this year.
Okay, so now that we're off of this, I don't mean to jump, and just to bring it up later, the new bus that we hope to anticipate to purchase, and would that be propane or diesel?
That decision has not been made yet. The monies that are in the budget are for a propane, which have been consistently about $8,000 more than a conventional diesel bus. So whichever way we decide to go,
Now, isn't there some thinking we've had over the years about fleet management, the percentage of propane versus diesel buses? Where are we relative to the, sort of the balance we want with that stuff, Mike?
when I came into the department 3 years ago, the direction was half diesel, half propane. We are there. Right now, we're running 23 regular runs. We have 12 propane, 11 diesels on the road.
How does that, so is that the balance we want? I mean, is that part of what's in your decision on the next bus you're gonna buy?
Yes and no. Right now, I think the decision is more based on fuel costs and mileage. Actually, once we get out of the winter months, I've already talked to Kyle. We're gonna run a side-by-side comparison, same driver, same route, 2 weeks in a diesel, 2 weeks in a propane, and do a side-by-side comparison. What are we getting for mileage? That's the only way you can truly do it, and, you know, you can't do it with 2 different drivers because they have different driving habits and skills. And so that's the plan for early this spring, to see what we've got, and then that can go into our decision about our next bus purchase.
But adding to that, the environment was certainly part of it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that we're being thoughtful about it, that's what's good.
We've actually are working with BOCES, and BOCES is trying to acquire an all-electric bus that the manufacturer is trying to get together and let school districts use it for 2 weeks each and kind of see where that goes. Right now, there's significantly more, like by 80,000 than a regular bus, but there's no fuel. So when you look at the long-range costs of it, they become much cheaper in the total life of the bus, but we have not had one delivered yet to even test. So
Batteries have to be amazing.
Well, as long as it doesn't have the name Prius on it, I'm okay with it.
Oh, okay, I'm with you there, okay.
Okay, so I think the next thing in this particular slide that needs attention is the fringe benefits at the bottom. This is, again, before I stated in our overall expenditure budget, I list fringe as one number. So this fringe represents the Fortune for Just program, and it's projected at $5.4 million for next year. The total fringe for next year I have at just over $6 million. I want to bring to your attention that within this current fiscal, we were scheduled very, very close on our medical health insurance. That continues to grow. It was a 7% increase this year. And we had very little wiggle room for individuals if they chose to pick up a new family policy or a new individual policy. So I was able to, over the weekend, I was thinking I had room for 5 additional family policies for next fiscal, and I was able to bump that to 9 additional policies for next fiscal. I think that's just smart planning. Really 9, we're a staff of just under 300 is really not a lot of room for change if people decide to change their insurance coverage. Co-curricular, this is positions like our program coordinators, and then athletics. Athletics, you would see if you looked at the individual lines, we've changed the numbers slightly, and that represents our non-instructional line has decreased, and our instructional salaries have increased due to the reassignment of coaching positions based on the contract. Okay, moving on to operation of plant or capital components. Debt service, I think, is one of the lines I want to bring your attention to. This, in 13-14, was the first fiscal where, you may recall last year I said it's really an accounting change. We started representing our debt service obligation in its entirety in the expenditure budget. I felt that it was important for the public to see the full amount that we pay on past capital debt. And this year, for next fiscal 14-15, you'll see that's a jump of about $385,000. That is completely offset. It's for capitalized interest on our new capital projects, and that'll be offset in the same exact amount in my revenue stream. It's really borrowing. So even though it shows as a significant increase to the expenditure budget, it's really offset by the same revenue stream.
So you're saying it's a wash?
It is. It is. But it's really important for everyone here in this room and also for the media to understand. I certainly wouldn't want it to seem that the district has a $385,000 increase because it's not used to support programs, it's not used to support teachers, it's really to offset that capital borrowing. It's 18 months of interest, essentially. Our interfund transfers, this line looks really bizarre, it's hard to follow, so I'll give you the explanation. In the past, that $5.5 million was represented as an interfund transfer, that being that we didn't show our capital debt and our debt services, which is the line just above it. And as I explained, we changed that last year so it was cleaner and easier to be understood by the general public. Now the interfund transfers, you can see Michael's pointing out the $216,000 for the current budget, and our next budget is at $196,000. What that represents is the transfer to the school lunch program and our net zero projects. You'll see if you look at the 13-14 year-to-date expenditures with encumbrance, after the budget is passed, and usually later in the fall, when the bus proposition is passed, we purchase our buses, and at that time we take that additional amount for buses, which in this case was just over $244,000, and we then increase the appropriated budget by that amount. So you will always see a jump from your budget to what the actual expenditures are in that interfund transfer. We transfer the money from the vehicle and equipment reserve, and it is then reflected in the expenditure budget. It's not included in the general fund budget in the beginning part. Many districts choose to have the bus proposition separate. Some public or communities will choose to vote down a bus, but they want to pass the budget, so they never want to put the two together. Fringe benefits, we could, again, spoken about this twice already. There is a little bit more of a jump this year. In the past, my treasurer has always figured out fringe benefits just based on the percentage of the budget and salaries. And this year, I asked her to be very intentional and specific. And so this year, you can see that $372,000 is based specifically on the salary lines that we're paying out. And really, what that did is it got that number more exact. Okay, this is a bit of a summary. So based on the adjustment and working within the tax cap, our projected revenue stream for 14-15 is $24.8 million. What I want to bring your attention to is that includes just over $1 million, and the breakdown of that is applied fund balance in the amount of $600,000, our ERS reserve in the amount of $425,000, our unemployment reserve, $52,000. That could be less if not knowing how many people will need to tap into unemployment, and an additional $686,000 that we take from the debt service fund. So what that means in that revenue stream is that at this point, going into next fiscal, we are $1.7 million dependent on money that is in reserves or that debt service fund. The good news is, I dropped that 200,000 from last fiscal.
And so what does this represent in a percentage increase, 1 point?
The overall budget, 2.2%.
So our revenue increased 2.2%.
Our expenditure budget to expenditure budget increased.
Expenditure budget to
All right, but I'm asking what's the implication to the taxpayer?
Okay, we'll get there. Ready?
Okay.
Bear with me. Okay, I'll do the next couple of slides, but I'll get to that, John. Areas of significant change, I've already touched on several of these, but just to highlight them again. PRS, the 17.53% contribution, you can see the difference from 13-14 to 14-15.
And you should see a decline in that next year, that's based on the 3-year average?
I will tell. Medical insurance, that was a 7% increase, and again, like I said, I included an additional amount for 9 additional family policies should the need arise. Our propane, we talked about that, the change in price per gallon. Water and sewer, I didn't touch specifically on that. Michael Bear-Package shared with me that we're looking at a 60% increase. So that was a
The
pretty
new
big
sewage
jump.
treatment plant, we're paying into that.
And they're rating us different now, aren't we? We used to be, we talk to the mayor once in a while.
Yeah,
And he
I'm
says,
not sure
are they
how,
changing our rates?
the rates are changing, I haven't been privy to exactly how they're changing, I was just notified of the increases. In the past, they used to do it by occupant,
Right.
and they only do that like every 5 years, they'll reevaluate it. So we give them a total count of staff, total count of students, and it's done that way. But now that this change has come about and they're changing their formula, I think that's out the window, but I will look into that.
So to touch on this again, because you brought this up last year, I'm once again asked, due to the problems that they're having with the facility in the village or the town, that we have an independent water test to ensure, I mean, you can read about it every day in the paper, that the water is high in chloroform and other stuff, that I would like to have that annually tested.
Okay, I think last year when you brought it up, it was BOCES came in and did the, I was on vacation, Michael brought it to my attention, and BOCES came up and took water samples for us.
Yeah, the fact is though, really, we would have had a sample at times when we knew the flush of stormwater was moving through there. If you just pick a day, a random day, it'd be hard to actually diagnose anything. To really get a measure of is our water in bad shape, you'd have to look at it over a period of time, or know when to pick a day when it could be bad.
Right, the best way to do it is you have to establish a baseline and then track it periodically, like maybe monthly, water samples.
Well, I
That's-
imagine we're their largest consumer, that we would be privy to those tests that they take, that they do already.
We get periodic notifications from them of the tests and what comes back. They send us those notifications automatically. I think it's done twice a year.
We don't want to go deep down
No,
this
I
road,
don't.
because let me tell you, what I learned last year from the problems that they had was that they're not required to do testing. They're required to make sure they're doing the right thing in the sewage treatment thing. All these things have to be in place. There's not as stringent testing requirements as you might think, oddly enough, but we can move on.
Okay. And the last item here is computer-assisted instruction, and as you know, with our continued investment in technology, I already discussed the change in services and the potential for increased bandwidth, so that's another significant change for our district. Just to review again, these are the adjustments that have been put forward and accepted. We had 2 FTE elementary education positions, and that has now changed, and we've had 2 individuals retire. 2 school monitors, those positions will be abolished. 0.5 7-12 social studies, which will be abolished. We had a 0.5 FTE in 7-12 mathematics abolishment. However, we have 1 FTE through attrition, so we'll actually be bringing that individual back. 0.83 FTE in foreign language, which is an abolishment. 1 FTE in 7-12 science, which is an abolishment. And a 0.5 7-12 English, which is an abolishment. In addition to that, I decreased the interfund transfer to our school lunch program based on the information from our consultant. I believe that reduction will represent $26,000 in the interfund transfer, that we will not have to contribute to that to the school lunch fund. Total reductions are at $420,000 for next fiscal. Oh boy, that's gonna start to be. Okay, so this is our revenue stream, you've seen it several times, you saw it last week. I think, Michael, if you go to the far right in the yellows, okay, that first yellow of 205,000 from 13-14 tax levy to 14-15 tax levy, we're picking up an additional $205,000. If you go down to the next yellow one, that number is now $188,000 that we're picking up in additional local revenue. It's offset because our interest earnings have dropped significantly since we no longer have $3 million in our capital reserve. So overall, in our local revenues, we'll pick up $188,000. In addition to that, I spoke extensively last board meeting about expenditure-driven revenues that the governor has proposed. Our increase from fiscal to fiscal represents $155,000 in state aid. If you go down to the next line, our overall increase in revenue represents $857,000. Keep in mind, $385,000 of that is our capitalized interest. I did not have that figure at the last board meeting because I felt that it would be very confusing to the general public. It is not $385,000 that can be spent on restoring positions. It's really just to meet that debt expenditure that's coming up in 14-15. As you move down, I reduced our applied fund balance to lower the levy. Last fiscal it was $800,000. Next fiscal I'm able to reduce that to $600,000. That has been my goal since I got here. We started out at $1.2 million and we are now down to $600,000. That's incredible, and I would like to keep it there from this point forward. At this point, our dependency just on our appropriated fund balance and the reserve from ERS and our reserve from unemployment is just over $1,000. Yep, I'm sorry, $1 million. And our fiscal to fiscal increase in revenue is $532,000, which is there at the far right, representing a 2.2% increase. Okay, this is John's question. Our property tax cap, the levy that I computed for next fiscal is $10.2 million. Growth factor is just part of the calculation. The allowable growth factor is 2%. Our tax levy limit represents 2.04%. Again, $10.2 million. This fiscal, there are no exclusions. In the past, if there's enough of an increase, sometimes you can exclude the amount toward ERS or TRS. This is not the case this year. So we're looking at additional revenue, as I previously stated, of $205,282 in our local levy. So what does that mean for the taxpayer? Last fiscal, our rate increase was 3.38%, representing $19.69 per $1,000 of assessed value, or for the cost of a $200,000 home, $3,938. This fiscal, we have a 2.04% increase. Rate per 1,000 is $20.09. We're looking at $4,018 for the cost for a $200,000 home, and that is not taking into consideration any reimbursements for STAR.
Kimberly, does that take in any account for more assessed property?
That, no. That is a straight figure. Questions or comments?
Glenn? Do we know historically how much assessed valuation has gone up in our district?
I do not. I could find out. I could make a phone call to Jay
Because that would then lower that increase, correct? Am I correct in doing that?
If there, pardon, John?
So it won't likely lower the average dollar, it'll increase your value of your home, but your tax rate could change. The dollar amount paid is the same.
I can get more details from Jay Franklin and
It's not
Shelby.
going to the evaluation.
What else, Gary?
Well, so, obviously, if we're just taking the same amount of property and increasing its assessed valuation, then the dollar amount doesn't change. But if we've increased, we've built new houses,
Sure,
then,
yeah.
then that would
And I
effectively
don't
lower
have that, I
right?
don't believe
Okay.
that's set until the summer.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Can we make sure we get that information?
Yes.
Of sort of how, well, I guess this is a measure of our growth in some way too, right, as a community? Because that's really sort of the bottom line generator of our income, is the value and size of that asset.
But it's hard to determine, like, out in Hector, we're under reevaluation, so our dollar value is obviously going to go up, but it's not going to necessarily be indicative of new homes. It may be a
Right.
portion of it, but not the whole.
Okay. This isn't a big deal, is it?
No, I can get that information.
John, did you have questions?
Just, we broke the $20 mark, and that's,
I know, when I did it, I cringed.
it's hard.
Symbolic.
What it is.
There's nothing but symbolic in the state of the You got anything for you? No. Okay, so we will then, we'll vote on that in the consent agenda unless there's any further discussion. This passing of this budget or adopting of the budget by the board will happen in consent unless we want to take it out. It's open forum time. Community members? Brief comments?
Good work.
Okay, so we'll have community reports, and it's time for the second reading, so I'll need a motion and a second. And we got a second, Jane, we'll pick it, and then, so we'll have some discussion now. And I believe last time we left this board, the question on the table was, is redundant good?
And
As I
actually,
recall.
probably about 90 seconds after Peter asked the question, I did find that language got moved to the front. It's on the bottom of page 6 of 22. It's the lowest highlighted text. So it could have been in there twice, but it's only in there once.
Are you okay with it being in there once?
Yeah.
Are there any other questions about the purchasing? Yeah. Other questions about the purchasing? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And we're there. Peter, what can you tell us?
Nothing.
Well, Gary and I can tell you. We walk around the track, there's a hole in the track.
The bleachers are almost gone.
Yeah.
Fencing's down?
Moving a bunch of stuff.
Has there just been tears of joy ripping those bleachers down?
I didn't even go out there.
You couldn't handle it.
I thought this actually was around, bleachers are gone.
As I recall, they were put up in 1971, 1970.
Right.
And so when do we believe we're going to hear from Mike DePerna for the first time?
He will plan on coming to all the board meetings starting with April 28th.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay, well, BOCES says the report is typically Douglas. She's not with us this evening. So that'll move us to board forum, and I don't see Abby. We have, I'll just say something for board forum here for a second. We are going to work on the evaluation in executive session, so we'll be calling for that later, but that's certainly something for the good of the board. Other items for the good of the board? Okay. Do we have any correspondence? Okay. Administrator's report. We'll start with you, Michael. I don't have any bullets here. Did you have anything you wanted to actually say, or nothing along the line?
I think the topic in the media is about opting out, and we do have 6 of our elementary students and 18 of our middle school students. And we will be looking at changing our efforts next year to communicate with all of our parents around the value of taking these tests and how they really have a role that is beyond what the state is doing to us. So we'll be working on that.
We don't need to hear from anybody else unless there's something pressing.
I'd love to talk more.
This is what I get for keeping you quiet for 5 months. Okay, I can't get you to stop now. So we have the consent agenda, and do anybody want to pull anything out?
Well, I don't think the budget belongs to the consent agenda.
We'll take it
I
out?
agree.
Okay, good. So we'll take the budget out of consent agenda, and that'll be F. F,
And the
G, F, G, and H. And so we'll leave E and I, which is that special CSE request. Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'll entertain a motion for 12A to E and I.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next. So we'll take the budget proposition first. This is a budget appropriating, general fund appropriations in the amount of $24,894,931 and to levy the necessary tax therefore. Any motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
I would just like to add, thank you for everyone for their input in making this a solid budget. It's a lot of hard work, and I'm certain that the taxpayers will.
Now we gotta get them out to vote.
They'll come out to vote, but you've done a lot of hard work. We're in a very difficult situation with the state and stuff, and I think people are beginning to realize that. But thank you.
Yeah, second here, yeah.
Ditto.
Final discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So we're there on F. We'll do the bus proposition, and this is to authority to expend up to $130,000 from the existing vehicle equipment reserve fund for the acquisition of one full-size conventional school bus. Move, second. Discussion.
Does this, I know we've been on schedule for bus buying, 2 a year.
I think it's been.
Is that right, Michael?
At one point, we were at 3,
Yeah.
and the target was 10 years and 100,000 miles.
Okay.
Last year, we started pushing the 9-year and less than 100,000 miles, hence we dropped back to 1 bus. There have been years prior to my tenure that there were 3 per year,
Yeah.
but they also had 26 bus routes. We're down to 23 routes now, so hence we don't need to turn around. So my guess would be probably 1 year or 2 years, you're going to be able to get 1 bus out of it. You may have to go back to 2 buses in order, if you're going to stay with the 10-year, 100,000-mile rotation.
You don't see us at 3.
Yeah.
I don't see a 3, no.
Okay.
No, I see a 3.
This is a Kimberly question. With this being outside the budget as a separate referendum, does it still calculate toward the tax cap?
No.
You follow what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. The tax cap calculation actually takes into consideration our debt and also the aid that we receive. And because we essentially pay cash, it's coming out of a reserve. Our capital numbers end up being negative, again, because we use debt service for our other capital debt. So it's a 0 in the tax calculation. What is confusing is what I stated before, is that because it's a separate proposition, once we purchase the bus, even though the money comes from the reserve, in the end, we have to then reflect that increase in the appropriated budget. And that's when I come back to the board and say, increase based on the proposition.
So the message to the public is this is coming out of a reserve, and this is no direct today or the immediate future cost of the taxpayer.
That is correct, because the money is already there. Essentially, we're paying cash.
Everybody knows.
How are we replacing that reserve, and if so, how quickly?
We have not replaced the reserve. That was the slide where I said this is our dependency, and so it is running out. When I come back, I believe it's the May 6th presentation, I will have that longitudinal spread on the reserves. I've shown it before, but I want to update it again.
So the implication then, if I'm correct, is that at the point that that runs out, this will be an impact on the tax line?
That is correct. We will need to borrow. Mhm.
We don't know how far out that is.
We're several years out on the buses. We're in good shape.
Because at some point, I know this is hard for everybody to imagine, but at some point, we're going to have to maybe think about, maintaining our reserves. I know this is a scary
That's where
thought.
my next question's going. Are we anticipating
Well, so
revenue?
example, I pointed out in special education, that's intentionally over budgeted to plan for the new student or students that arrive in the district so that we can support their educational needs. However, in the end, if they don't move into the district, there is additional fund balance there. And at the end of the year, the end of the fiscal, which is when I'm soon to cut off spending, we will know how much additional fund balance we have. And then prior to June 30th, I will come to the board and say, we didn't spend all that special education money. It's now called fund balance, and I would like to move that into a reserve. And so we'll put it back into the ERS or into the vehicle and equipment reserve. So it'll be a small funding piece, but it should be something.
Final discussion about the buses and expenditures in G.
Just a quick question for Michael. Where do buses go when they're no longer
Mexico.
Down south.
Mexico is probably a good guess. Over the years, they have been traded to the vendor that's provided us the buses.
Do we get a
his-
trade-in allowance?
Historically, we've been getting about $2,800 to $3,000 apiece. We decided to go through a company called Auctions International this time. We doubled our money. So we're going to start using them. They're no cost to the district. We will run all of our surplus equipment and vehicles through them in the future. They were excellent to deal with, and they exceeded all of our
Are these
expectations.
the guys down in Waverly?
They're out of Auburn, actually.
How did we make out on the truck we sent there? Didn't we send up 350 there?
The old Ford, I don't know if you've seen the old Ford before it left, but there wasn't a lot of metal left.
Yeah.
Well,
And I'm not sure the brakes work, but I think we ended up getting $1950 out of it.
Wow.
And it was only worth about $450 scrap. So we figured we did really well. There's no way they could license it and put it on the road. They're just using it as a farm vehicle to beat around the woods with, so.
Well, good.
But we did well on everything that we sent to them.
That's good. We're always happy to put that in the revenue line, Kimberly.
I did.
All in favor of G?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? So G passes. We'll move on to the library proposition, authorized to raise the tax levy by $3,405 from $101,709 to $105,114 for support of our glorious Ulysses Philomathic Library. So I need a motion and a second.
Second.
Excellent. Discussion.
anyone?
Go ahead, John.
Mike, don't worry, you're going to sleep now.
Let's just be careful how much time we spend on things we absolutely can't do anything about.
And I understand that, but I need to be assured that the tax cap has affected every layer of government that we have. And if you calculate the request, it's 3.3%. And I have been to many meetings over the years, and last year I was fortunate enough to sit in on one where the library had asked the youth commission, who runs our grants and whatnot from all the different entities, for $4,000, and they received that. Then they asked the town of Ulysses, or the village, gives them $4,000. They've got all these funding streams out there. Plus, they're allowed to have bake sales or what have you. They can raise their own money.
Don't wander too far astray, Mr. White.
Yeah, so I question, aren't they not held to the same standards of a tax cap as we are?
Reading from the director of the library's email today, a few points that might help regarding your question. Number one, we did not go over the tax cap in our request. Now, I haven't gone through her numbers, but that's what she says. We are facing rising costs for fuel, personnel, and insurance. And then she makes a few other points that just talk
Okay,
about
well-
library services. But she's said that for 2 years in a row, that she did not go over the cap.
And so I can add to that, in that you've heard me say many times, the 2% tax cap is really not a 2% tax cap, so forget the 2%. And so it's different for every municipality, all school districts. Ours is 2.04 this year, and we're within the cap. Last year, we were 3.38, and we were within the cap. So again, I've not checked her calculations, but it is conceivable that they are within their cap.
So I need to hear, just somebody to listen to
Is-
about this.
Point of clarification, is there a separate vote on this, or is this just folded in?
Yeah.
It's a separate proposition.
Oh, okay.
So
So-
it's conceivable that the voters could pass ours and not pass the libraries.
Which we would
And they
very
could also
sad.
not pass the bus, if that's the
Right.
same.
Right.
There's actually 3 of them on
Three
it, plus the
possibilities.
board candidate.
And the tax, or
Levy.
estimated levy and tax increase in dollar figure that you put up doesn't include this, correct?
Correct. Mine is completely standalone. Theirs is a separate proposition listed on the ballot, just as our bus proposition is separate.
Final discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
I'll abstain.
John's abstaining, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm sorry, we did I in the consent, so we're good. New business? So we'll need to move for adjournment forthwith to executive session,
So
okay? Thank you very much. Yes? Yes, and it is because of matters relating to the appointment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, removal of a particular person, persons, or corporation. Off we go.
I want to make a comment about this troubadour. This was good reading, right? The people that put their effort into this was very good.
That is a Trumansburg Foundation funded project
I'd
in the
like
high
to see
school.
this one too.